Hello and hi and hey, I'm Xavier, a film guy, and welcome to this review of the Final Space graphic novel. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. So, if you're wanting to hear my thoughts on it, here I am. Non spoiler part of the review. I think it's really good. The colors are really beautiful, pretty, they pop. The lighting and the shading in each shot and each panel is so good. It's so good. I actually really like the text bubbles. I think that I like how they distinct between a couple different characters that are talking. I think that those are so important. And that's great. I love that too. That was a cool aspect. One thing that I've always really appreciated about Final Space is the backgrounds for space that they decide to have. They're so pretty and beautiful and vibrant. Despite Final Space kind of being a really depressing story, the space backgrounds are so vibrant and pretty, and it's so pretty to look at. I keep wanting to say like I don't enjoy space stories. You know what I mean? Like I don't enjoy space. I don't think that space produces good stories. I think that that's a little I think that that's first of all a little superficial, right? But also I think it just comes from the type of story that's being told. And I think that Final Space does it in this unique way that kind of just perfectly encapsulate what I want from a space story, not a face story, a space story, which is like character centric, character driven, emotional, and internal. While the stakes feel like grand, space wise, and like universe wise, the stakes are so internal and personal for a lot of these characters that we're experiencing with. I think that that's what Final Space has always been about for me. So those are kind of the basis of which I'm heading into this. So yeah, I think that the book is really good. I think the coloring and shading alone is worth the price of admission to the book. I think if the writing doesn't want to sell you on it, like if you didn't enjoy the show that much or anything like that, and you're cautiously optimistic about the book, and you got into the show and you liked it, but you didn't enjoy the quippy humor that much, I mean, it's still there, but I think that the colors and the panels and all that kind of stuff and the way that the thing is structured is like really interesting, at least on that kind of a level. So if you're curious, you're cautiously optimistic, I think it's worth it. And it's like a one-time thing, right? This is the last print they're doing. They're not doing another one. So I mean, like it's a real get on the ground floor kind of vibe. Yeah. Like I said, the colors are really beautiful. The backgrounds are really pretty. I like the character designs. Updating them from where they were at the end of season 3 to the time jump is very gorgeous and pretty. If I was listing out my favorite like time jump designs, I think Quinn's is really good. I also really enjoy Ash's time jump design. I think that's really great. I don't like Kato's that much. If I'm getting a little critical. And yeah, I think Gary's looks good too. I don't really have a complaint. I mean, it kind of looks more similar than he did. I think his hair is a little longer and his clothes are a little different, but he kind of looks really similar. Everyone else looks a lot like radically different. Kato and Gary, they look pretty much the same that they did. So I'm not really, focused about it. But yeah, I think that the character design for the book largely is like super good, really well done, really impressive, that kind of stuff. I mentioned the dialogue bubbles, I'm pretty sure, that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's kind of where I start non-spoilery. So non-spoilers, it was really good. If you're looking for a number and just somehow how I felt in a quick review, a quick little thing, I think it's like a 6.5 for me personally, which is really good. That's good. It's really close to a 7. It's not so much close to a 5. It's at a 6 for me. I should review my credentials. I'm a big Final Space nerd. I've been watching Final Space since the pilot aired back on TBS. I watched Olan on Conan. I was really excited for that. I supported Olan on Patreon for months. I was a supporter during the Final Spacebook era. However, I didn't get the Patreon version. I think I missed it or whatever, or something like that, but I'm not really worried about getting it or anything. I supported Godspeed on Kickstarters, both the Kickstarters. I really enjoy Final Space, one of my favorite shows. It's like number 2 or 3 on my list of top 10 favorite shows. So it being a 6 is kind of a big deal for me. And so this is kind of why. And I'll get into a little bit of spoilers, but I won't spoil big plot points until much later into the review. So if you want to hear a little more, you can. I think a feeling that I've been dealing with since getting the book is this cautiousness to reading the book. You know, I got it on Tuesday and I didn't read it until Wednesday. Well, I didn't read it until Thursday, actually. And I didn't read it until Thursday because I was scared. I was a little terrified of reading it. Right now I have anxiety talking about it. But yeah, I didn't read it until Thursday morning. And when I did sit down and read it, I read the whole thing in one sitting. It took me an hour and a half to read the book, and that includes breaks here and there for 15 minutes between each part. So it took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to read. Like I said, the thing I'm sitting with the book is I think that I read it too fast. You know what I mean? Like the pacing for the book felt really, really quick. You know, and I think that's me. I think I just have a really fast reading speed. And I thought that having the music on was going to allow me to slow down a lot more during this. But it turns out having the music on did not help that in the slightest. I don't think that not having the music on would have changed much either. I think that I went through it really quickly. But that being said, I do think that the pacing for the book is really quick and fast. Like it's 500 pages, right? It's a 500-page novel, I'm pretty sure. It felt like 200 pages. When I reached the hour and a half mark, when I finished, I couldn't even believe that an hour had passed. It felt that quick. So I guess that's a testament to both it being really hook line and I was into it and that kind of stuff, but also I think it moved too fast. There were points at which I wish we would slow down a lot more and experience moments of stuff. At multiple times I thought that when we were going to reach a page that felt super impactful, like I wanted to talk about, hold on, there's one page in particular, but I want to make sure that I'm right about this. You know what? I can just talk about so I'm not going to go any further past the part 1 prologue, which is Gary saying goodbye to Kevin. The pages are online, I'm pretty sure, or some of them are, or it's not that big of a spoiler. So if you're still wanting to be completely unspoiled, this is where you should cut off. But if you don't care, you want to continue moving forward, I'm trying to cautiously walk us through this. Gary saying goodbye to Kevin is like, it feels significant. You know what I mean? Like, cause me, the audience, I don't quite know if Gary's going to die at the end of the story or not. And so these moments where Gary is saying goodbye to characters, like it feels like they should be longer. Maybe it's just me, but that was my complaint multiple times throughout these sections. Like I wanted them to be longer, and I wanted to sit with what Gary felt like whenever he was going to watch these people disappear from his life forever for the rest of time. And the prologue is building up to this big moment in the novel, which I won't say any more about, but it doesn't feel impactful, you know, and I don't know if that's because the medium has changed from show to comic book, and I just read through it really quickly, and it was supposed to feel impactful, and it does feel paced fine, or what, but I read through this thing, it was like a page turner, so I'm like flipping pages pretty quickly, and like Gary saying goodbye to Kevin is significant because Kevin is like a core cast member, and I find it weird that he's the first person that he says goodbye to, because like I do think that he hates Kevin, but also there's a moment in here where he has like a significant character building moment where he talks about actually kind of liking Kevin a little bit. And like that's a moment that like we all knew as the audience. He cares for Kevin because he's a part of this found family that they're in. But that being said, it doesn't feel like, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it has the weight at which it needs in order for this moment to feel like it was impactful for me. And so that's kind of my large complaint for multiple things throughout the graphic novel. A lot of the scenes move too quickly, you know, like I'm wanting to linger with things that are happening. And I guess I personally could linger on the page, but when the page is like, when the action is kicking up and ramping up and you're flipping through them really quickly, it just feels like you're flipping through the actions really quickly. And this one, I'm admitting, is on me. But that's how it felt. Multiple times I wanted to like slow and read, and maybe on a second read through, this complaint will completely disappear. But yeah, I don't know. There are moments where I'm wanting more from these intro prologue scenes that I just don't get. And it's disappointing because it feels like these are supposed to be like real vulnerable moments with Gary where he's saying goodbye to the people that he loved. And I never really feel the emotional weight of this. And I don't know if that's on me or if it's on the book. And yeah. Aside from that, the writing wise, I didn't much enjoy the stuff with Little Kato, I guess. It feels too fast. That's been my complaint for a large portion of the novel. Like, I want to sit and linger with some of the storylines, but it feels too quick. And I think this is a result of, this is the final book. You know what I mean? This is it. We get no more. And so we're kind of just thrown head first into everything. And I don't get any time to linger or think about or sit with any of these feelings that these characters might be sitting, because the story is actively pushing them towards the end of the story. You know what I mean? We have this big time gap, and it's revealed to us in a really interesting way, and it comes out of nowhere and feels super weird. And I think, and it's intentional, but then we don't get moments after the time jump where we get to sit with the fact that time has jumped. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of my complaint for a large portion of the novel. I'm rambling in circles, so now I'll move on. So yeah, that was one of my complaints with the writing, is that it feels both fast and too slow in places. Too slow in places like the stuff with Little Kato gets a lot of drawn out exposition and all that kind of stuff. And it's important because it's really important to the themes of the book. You know what I mean? Found family, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I never really get to feel the weight that these choices are, that he's making these choices about. You know what I mean? Like at points, Little Kato is just kind of like missing his parents despite not knowing him. And he addresses this in the book. And I know that it's like the entire time this is going on, that piece of dialogue is supposed to reframe how I feel about everything. But during these opening scenes, whenever he's like talking about his mom and dad who Avocado killed, which is not a spoiler for the book, but is a spoiler for the TV show. I never really feel that, you know what I mean? And I guess that's the point, you know what I mean? The point is that it feels hollow because he can't miss them because Avocado took that away from him. Like, that's quite literally a piece of dialogue that's in the book. But yeah, it just never felt right, you know, and I guess maybe that's it. So yeah, I didn't much enjoy that storyline. I did like the thing with Avocado in Trivulia. I thought that stuff was super well done. That was some of my favorite stuff. I think that watching Avocado make up for his past mistakes in a way that feels kind of significant felt important to me, and that felt like what the book was about. Because for me, this book is about redemption, found family, and loss, you know? And I feel like those are three significant themes that are important to Final Space across the board. And so, yeah, that was some good stuff. I enjoyed that. I think the writing there is really good. I think it's silly and goofy. that Final Space is usually. There's a moment at which the leader of the Trivulians says something to the Ken like, like I changed my mind a lot or something. I felt like that was a little gimmicky, and I felt like it feels like these are episodes from a pilot of each season that we got. You know what I mean? Like, and the last part is just that entire season just shrunk. Does that make any sense? Like each of these parts that we get, each of the 5 parts feel like pilots for beginning of seasons that we didn't get, and then 6 and 7 are the entire ending of the story, like shrunk together, with a bunch of details missing. That's what it kind of felt like for me, and it felt like there was more to develop each of these spots, and I'm sure there was. And I know this thing got canceled, and this is just my feeling. I'm talking about how I feel about it. So don't cancel me. So yeah. Otherwise, I like surface level. I like the idea of Gary saying goodbye to a bunch of people. That's great because it has this cute little metatextual commentary where Olan gets to say goodbye to some of the characters that meant a lot to him. Clearly, by the way he ends the book with that text that he wrote, and also we get to watch Gary himself say goodbye, and that's super emotional for us as well. What else? The soundtrack. I think it's really good. I think the soundtrack is really good. I thought it was really impressive. It's so beautiful to listen to. However, I don't think that I will listen to it while I read the book every single time. If not, maybe that might be the last time I listen to it while I read, because it did feel more cinematic, but it's hard because it didn't add a whole lot for me. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like background noise at which I was just listening to it. And at times I would tune into the soundtrack and tune out to the book and tune into the book and tune out to the soundtrack. And it felt as if it was supposed to come into one cohesive whole. And that never really happened to me. That being said, there's a couple really good tracks that I liked, especially the ending track, and the good stuff thing, which is a tie back to a previous season. But yeah, the soundtrack experience didn't work for me, and I was really excited for that specific element because the music for Final Space is such a crucial element of the book. But it almost felt like unbearably silent to read it in silence. You know what I mean? Like, it was uncomfortable, like reading it in a good way, I feel, for me personally. Again, this is my personal experience. You can tell me all about your personal experience with a book in the comment section below. I want to talk about this book for the rest of my life because I don't want the show to end. I don't want anybody to stop talking about it, obviously. What else? There are a couple of great scenes in this thing. Like the stuff with the all-seeing white being is super impressive. Super good. I think really well written. It sets the stakes, changes the way that the story is moving in such a great way. I think that the stuff with Invictus is well written. However, I thought we were going to get more with him. I was really confused whenever he felt kind of like a super background character. And I'm sure that there's some planned, there's DLC to the book, which is weird to say, but there's DLC to the book. So I'm sure there's some planned DLC with some background history on Invictus. And I guess I want to make that clear that the story isn't done yet. We still have more to come. So I'm waiting on that. But yeah, I don't know. I thought we were going to get more with Invictus, and we really didn't. Oddly, we got more with the Lord Commander than I thought we were going to get. And I guess now is where I'm veering into spoiler territory. So I think that now, if you guys are worried about super big spoilers, then here's where we go. But I wasn't expecting a full redemption of Lord Commander. I really wasn't expecting that in the slightest. And it makes sense for the story, and I'm still kind of thinking on it and seeing how I feel about it. But I wasn't expecting it, that's for sure. I thought that, he was a character who we weren't going to redeem. And again, I'm keeping in mind that this story is told super quick. But it just felt so weird to watch him just in the last three parts suddenly get a redemption arc that felt like it came out of nowhere. And I sure can't be the only one who thinks that. Like, I like the Lord Commander. I love David Tennant. Didn't know it was David Tennant until I read the credits of episode 1. Was impressed because I love David Tennant. Found out that he was coming back for season 2. Was super excited. Came back for season 3. I was more excited. Back in the book, I'm more excited. However, just a little confusing that he came out of nowhere. Like, and I guess anything was fair game, so I should keep that in mind. But also at the same time, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Because, like, on one hand, I'm like, I love the stuff that he got here. I think it's super interesting for his character and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, it was super rushed. And then I read string theory back to, it's not the book's fault that it's super rushed. This had to be the ending. You know what I mean? That's like, I want to hammer home that that's how I feel about a lot of the complaints that I had. This had to be the ending of the book. The story has to be complete here. And that being said, that's where a lot of my complaints come from, is the fact that this had to be the ending. And so I don't want to be ungrateful and say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did really love it and I cried, etc., etc. I got the emotional experience I was looking for. I'm just also critical of the stuff that I consume as well. And I feel like that's fair. And if you don't think it's fair, that's not funny. I don't know. I was trying to tell a joke and it didn't work. I'm moving on. Now I can talk about, like, there's 2 scenes, okay, from the graphic novel that I think deserve some criticism, on like a basis of, these scenes don't make sense, and it's not because this had to be the ending of the story, or at least I feel like it isn't. They just don't make sense. One of my favorite characters from the book is Cheryl Goodspeed, and also from the show, too. Cheryl is one of my favorite characters. I think that she is so well written, because not only is she really complicated to write, and the book and the show do her such justice in a way where the book or the show don't provide excuses for her character, but allow explanations for the way that she's acting. I think that stuff is so vulnerable and real and honest, and that was some of my favorite stuff from season 2 of Final Space. But yeah, Cheryl is one of my favorite characters from Final Space, and I feel like her character in this isn't good, and that was super heartbreaking for me, and maybe that's where I'm coming from, where I'm like, it's a 6.5, because there's this scene really late in the book where John reappears, and John and Cheryl have this fight back and forth, and then John offers Gary like this chance to join his side, and it just makes no sense. You know what I mean? Like, it makes no sense, because this should have been offered to Cheryl. It's something that would have pulled her arc completely together in a way that is so emotionally relevant, and really would have allowed her, she should have been the one to, like, choose in this scene. Like, I get it's important for Gary to choose as well, and this could have been done in another scene, but this scene where John propositions Gary makes no sense, because while John feels like a big loss for Gary, I never get the sense that he would want to join his father. But Cheryl did want that. You know what I mean? Like, Cheryl wanted to join John wherever he was at. Gary's want to be with his father, for me at least, felt like it closed at the end of season 1. Like, I think he still wants his dad back, but I think that comes from missing his dad more than it comes from wanting to be with his dad. And I think that's what I'm trying to communicate here. This scene is John reaching out to Gary in a way that's confusing to me, because at the end of season 1, at least, it felt as if John reached out to his dad, or reached out to Gary and said, when John reached out to his Gary and offered him a position where he is, Gary responded with, "Which way is Quinn? Which way is Quinn?" You know what I mean? And so I guess my point is that this moment right here feels significant, but also feels like it's repeating a moment from the end of season 1 instead of trying to show this moment, but in a different light. And that's what it should have been, I feel like. That's what I'm trying to communicate here, but I had a hard time saying it. So now I'm saying it now. Thank you. Her arc would have been like watching her husband die and go away and having this goal and this thing in life to join him wherever he's at. You know what I mean? Like actively we watch her kind of suicidal and depressed and riddled with anxiety and all this other stuff. And then it just kind of feels like it's forgotten. And I don't ever feel like in the show that stuff comes to a close. Like Gary's mom does come back, but that stuff that she went through is still very much open. And so her character never really feels like it closes out here. And that's disappointing for me, at least. And I'm trying to describe this in the best way possible. But this scene, I think, would have worked way better if John was propositioning Cheryl. Again, I think I'm a writer. I'm not. I don't know what I'm talking about. So if I'm wrong, that's fine. And maybe there's an explanation why it's this way instead of that way. I'm sure there is. But that's how I felt when I was first reading this scene. Was it felt kind of hollow as a result. Because like we know it's Invictus, you know what I mean? And I feel like Gary would know that this is Invictus too. But Cheryl would be enticed by the proposition that John is presenting to her, that Invictus is hoping that she'll have. And it's like, I would think that this is something that wasn't thought about, except like the whole stuff with Fox and Ash in season 3. You know what I mean? Like that stuff is very much tangentially related to what we got in front of. Is tangentially the right word? Who cares? That stuff is all kind of relevant to what we got going on here in the book too. And so, yeah, I don't know. That stuff just felt like it wasn't as well written as the other stuff. And yeah, I don't know if that's a fact. That's just how I feel, of course. And other people could love the way that this is done, and I would love to hear from people who did really like this stuff and tell me why. But I don't know. That's how I felt. And I don't know. That's all I got to say about that. But yeah, I was really disappointed, and like I was preparing for a really emotional moment with Gary and his mom, and then like his mom does sacrifice herself for Gary, and that's super impactful, and I think that's really well done. But I don't know. I don't know what it is about. I just didn't feel right. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel cohesive. So, yeah. Another big moment. It's literally the same pages. And this could be coming from the feeling that I had from the Cheryl stuff, but the stuff with avocado and little cavo, the stuff with avocado and little cado did not feel good to me. Like, and like, not in like a way where I like needed it to feel better, but in a way where it like didn't sit right with me. Because like avocado is supposed to be learning from his mistakes, and he messes up again, which is great. I think that's really important to show that like you don't just change today. You don't just change tomorrow. You have to keep trying to be better than you were yesterday. But then there's no acknowledgement of this thing that he does. So in a couple pages earlier, during this fight with avocado and little cado, the king dies. And he says, protect little cado. And then avocado puts a force field over little cado and traps him in a force field and fights by himself. And I was pissed off. I was upset. I was mad because it felt like avocado had come to the conclusion of like, yeah, I need to protect him. But also several times I feel like avocado had learned his lesson of allowing little cado to fight his own battles. And I figured seeing him older and more distinguished and being allowed to talk to him, which he does a few times, right? He does a little bit. Yeah, he does. Okay, I'm right. which watching it, I feel like Avocado has already learned this lesson of allowing his son to fight his own battles as opposed to. So I thought this was going to be this big moment where Little Cado walked up and joined Avocado, and they fought side by side. And finally, it would be this moment, not where Little Cado felt like he was an outcast or an outsider to Avocado, but they felt like a family. You know what I mean? I feel like that was a moment that was a super big missed opportunity. And I know this was done because Avocado wanted to protect Little Cado, but he's also taking away Little Cado's agency here, and I didn't love that either, just so we're clear. On the flip side. But yeah, so then that's what happens, because he fights this battle without Little Cado, it feels a little hollow whenever he releases the force field and hugs him after he's killed everybody, and Little Cado is like, you don't have to be that monster anymore, because it feels like we've already done this. You know what I mean? It feels like season 2 and season 3, we were doing this, and the show's about redemption. And I feel like having these moments with Cheryl and having these moments with Avocado were super important, because the parents were protecting the kids, but also they were on their own redemptive pathway too. They were looking for redemption. And there's something to be said about, can you find redemption amongst all the terrible things that you've done? The book answers this by saying, yes, you'll never be forgiven for the stuff you've done, but you can find a path to live a new life where things feel good for you. Or at least that's how I feel the book is. That's what I feel the book is saying. Something to that extent. If I was trying to be more poetic, I would say something super poetic here. I just wanted to interject here and add my poetic thing. I specifically said here that you'll never be forgiven. I just want to asterisk that by saying that you can't change the past, I think is what I was trying to say. Not you'll never be forgiven. Clearly there are multiple times where characters do something that's really heart-wrenching and really dark, and it comes from a place where it's explainable while they're doing it, but there's no excuse for what they're doing. The show isn't excusing them from what they're doing. It's just allowing you to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and the characters are still forgiven. So forgiveness is a thing in Final Space, just so we're clear. I wanted to interject because I know what I was trying to say here, but and I said it just wrong. It came out wrong. But forgiveness is a thing in the show and in the book. I think what I'm trying to say is it's not about forgiveness. It's about you can't change the past. You can only look forward to the future and hope to be better. That's what I was trying to say. Anyway, back to the thing. But yeah, so it just felt a little hollow and one note whenever we got to these big moments that I guess I was expecting expectations to rip out from underneath me, and they didn't rip out from underneath me. And so that was really disappointing for me, I guess. Now I want to talk about Ash's character. Ash is also one of my favorite characters from the show. I think that her character is also super well written. And I know the point of the novel for almost the entire thing of it is wondering where she is. And her popping up is supposed to be this big moment. And we flash back 5 years later and we watch her lead up to getting where she is. And I think it's really good. And I think it's some of the best writing in the thing. But that being said, it felt like her character was a drive to put the Lord Commander back on a redemptive arc more than it was about her. You know what I mean? And also, I guess another complaint that I had, hold on, I just want to get to that spot in the book. That way I could have, there's this moment where I was screaming out loud at my book. I talk to myself a lot. Could you imagine the guy who's making a YouTube video talking about Final Space talks to himself? Yeah, I do. It never felt like Gary needed to forgive it never felt like Gary needed to forgive Ash. Like there was never a wait. There was never a build-up there where I felt like Gary needed to forgive Ash. Ash does betray the group to some degree, I guess, if we're getting super detailed about it. But maybe I'm just not remembering season 3 well enough, or maybe I didn't read the book as well as I should have. But like the apology feels not needed. You know what I mean? Like if anything, it should be Gary apologizing to Ash, you know? Because Invictus doesn't say Invictus uses the memory of Fox in order to manipulate Ash, and Gary seems like aware of that the entire time. Maybe I'm wrong. That's always the case. But it never really feels like that's the case. And I guess it comes from, I'm trying to think about also the struggle with mental health too. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm trying to also take into account that Ash has been by herself and alone and felt like she's been isolated and distant from everything. And that's also a factor that I'm keying in here. However, I never really felt like at any point Gary needed to forgive her. It really felt like Ash needed to forgive Gary. And I know there was already a big moment where Gary apologized to Ash, and it felt like a pretty cohesive and strong moment, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been so long since I've seen season 3, obviously. It got tax written off. That was so sad. That was such a sad joke. But yeah, it is obviously it's been like so sad. And I don't know. That's how I felt about Ash's stuff. Like I wanted it to be super impactful, and it just never felt like it reached that. Hello, I'm just cutting in to clarify again. I guess I'm doing that a lot this time. I was only going to do it for like one, but now I'm getting to the point where like my thoughts are a little more scrambled, and so now I'm cutting in and interrupting myself. I just wanted to clarify that like the stuff that's written here, the stuff about mental health and about loneliness and about how the voices tell ourselves what to think, like that stuff is really, really well written and really impactful. I'm just talking about purely from a character standpoint. Like I wish that we got more time to see this stuff start to affect Ash for longer, I guess that's my thing. You know what I mean? Like this stuff is super impactful, and seeing those words on the pages and like seeing where Ash is at mentally and crying because, you know, I can relate to these feelings and emotions and these thoughts as well. But yeah, it's just for Ash as a character, like it needed a little bit more, something more to bring it cohesively together. Like it would have been cool if, this is just a suggestion, I'm not saying that this should be how it is. And obviously I'm not the writer of the story. I talk about it at the end of this thing, but like maybe we watch Ash's mental state slowly deteriorate, you know? Like we need to see that stuff. When we catch up with her after 5 years, she comes out of Invictus's trance and she's lost a lot of time, and she realizes the stuff that she's done, and the voices in her head are telling her that she's done bad stuff, but the time jump kind of makes it impossible to both see the horrible stuff that she's done and relate to her on that level, and also at the same time understand completely what she's going through. Like I can understand it based on my own lived experience, but I don't know what Ash's lived experience is. I want to know about that, I guess, is my point here. I just wanted to clarify that like this stuff is super impactful and relatable and et cetera, et cetera. Mental health sucks. But I just wanted to clarify that like on its own, singularly, and I'll cover this here in just a few minutes, but singularly on its own, this is a really well-written scene. I'm just talking about as a part of the whole, as a cohesive narrative, that's where it kind of feels a little lackluster. Anyway, back to the thing. Thank you. And I think that like as an independent chapter, this is kind of what we get at. We're gonna drag back to my original thesis. This is kind of like my original thesis for what I said at the beginning of this review, or something roughly about it. As individual chapters, these are really well written, like sections of the story that's being told here. That being said, as a part of the whole, it falls, for me at least, a little flat because I don't get to experience the things that are there. And so as a result, I'll drag this back to the soundtrack. The soundtrack isn't hitting the beats that it needs to hit, because not Final Space, the music is super important, but the character moments are the things that sell me on this thing. It's all about the character for me. It's all about what the characters are experiencing and how they feel. And so yeah, that's how I felt. The music falls flat as a result of the characters not working. And while sections of the story are really good, larger parts of the story don't feel quite as good. Don't feel quite as good. I was kind of disappointed we didn't see Mooncake for a large portion of this, and when we did, he was on Invictus's side. Especially because Mooncake is such a crucial element to Gary, and so him disappearing really early on in the story, like already being gone. I assume, if I remember correctly, that's correct. But Mooncake being on Invictus's side from the beginning of the story is warranted and needed, and it pays off that redemption arc. But then we don't get enough time. I guess that's my entire point. I didn't get enough time. You know what I mean? Like, because now I'm gonna drag this into, I don't get enough time with Mooncake after he's under Invictus's control to feel what he feels. You know what I mean? Like, a good portion of season 1 is dedicated to Mooncake understanding that he's a planet-destroying superweapon and how that affects the people around him and him personally, internally, and how he's capable of killing people, and that's like a crucial element to the story. You know what I mean? He has to reckon with the fact that he's this huge weapon that could kill anybody, and at one point in season 1, he cowers and hides from Gary because he's scared he's going to hurt him. He leaves. Nightfall uses it against him. I don't get to experience the aftermath of that. You know what I mean? I watched Mooncake become the planet-destroying superweapon, and that was it. You know what I mean? And then I watch him get out of that state, and I watch him sacrifice himself. And I didn't get to sit with what he had done while he was under the control of Invictus, you know? And I guess that's what I wanted more of. So yeah, I don't know. That felt pretty important to say. What else? Hello, I do talk about the ending here in a few after my rant about art and my rant about this cool little thing I noticed, but I did want to mention Gary and Quinn and like the ending that they get now. Just because, you know, it's cohesive, it'll fit within this before I start talking about art as a whole and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that their ending is really good. And that being said, I do think that they're the best part of the story that's being told here. Like, I like that we're not rehashing this, I like that we're not rehashing the doomed romance subplot, but I do like that it gets a passing mention. I think it comes from the fact that the show is both like canceled, and so we're having to recap some events from the show, and at the same time, you know, I do wish we spent a little longer lingering with this idea of the doomed romance and how they were meant to be together but never truly meant to be. I think that would be really impactful, and I'm curious where it's going, you know what I mean? Like, because this is the end of the story, but there's clearly more to go on, and if we're connecting this universe with the Godspeed universe, clearly Iris is important to some degree for some reason, you know, and that scene in Godspeed makes me cry every time, and I'm thinking about it now. And that's unrelated to what we're talking about, I guess, in a broad way. But like, I guess I'm curious what the whole point of the doomed romance, like, is it the fact that they are the ones that finally subverted the expectation of meant to be together but never truly meant to be? Like, I guess I just want to know what the point of it was, because it felt nothing but like melancholy for melancholy's sakes. I wish it had like kind of maybe I missed it. Maybe you guys can tell me what I missed, but that's what it felt like. The entire time I kept sitting with this thought of like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the point? what is the point of this thing, and what's it trying to say by saying meant to be together but never truly meant to be. Like, if I'm sitting with that thought, I think that the story's ending should be way more tragic than it is happy. And I think maybe my preconceived notions of what I wanted Final Space to end like, again, we're playing on this thought of like how I already grieved the show. I thought the show's ending was supposed to be tragic, and it's happier than I thought it was. But it felt like that line, that subplot was supposed to play into this entire thing that I'm doing here way more potently, I guess that's my entire point. But I didn't even give it a chance to talk about it because for the most part, it's the best stuff that's written, but also it's the stuff that's the same to the book. It doesn't really iterate on anything new. It just brings these old thoughts up from the past, like from the past of the story. So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to give this a passing mention now, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later, and I'll talk about the ending to the whole graphic novel here in a minute. One of my favorite aspects of the book was how it went from color to black and white. That was crazy. Dude. That was super impressive. That's super good. I wish they had done that as soon as they got rid of the light from the start. Like the all color had disappeared. I get that they wanted to emphasize color in these back halves. And like purple is pretty relevant, and also green's pretty relevant. I get what they were doing with color theory here. But having those panels be gone is super cool. I wonder if in the Midnight Edition, those colors are there in those back panels. Those purples and those greens, because I think that would be super cool. And maybe I'm super right. Yeah. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on everything. Oh, you know what? I set up a like a pen, put a pen in it in season 2. I like season 2. I think it's good. I think that there's a lot of bad, to be fair, but I feel the same way about season 2 of Final Space that I feel about season 4 of Community. There are some episodes that I enjoy that a lot of people don't like. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. I think it's good. One of my biggest disappointments from Final Space will always be Todd's character. Like, I can't believe how badly he is fumbled. And I thought that this graphic novel was going to give him a redemption arc or some kind of redemption, or we were going to bring him back in some significant way. And to scroll on to, what was it? It's the prologue. It's literally part 1. Right? Hold on, let me just make sure. Maybe he was dead at the end of season 2 or something, and I just didn't notice until the book. That's always the case. Anyway, I came across a page where he was dead, and I was so disappointed. And I remember it being part of the book, but maybe it happened in the show. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I just need to watch it again, really. And I want to do that. I want to watch the show and then read the book and see how that kind of flows into each other. But this is me reading the book after years of not watching the show and now reading the book and trying to remember everything that happened in the show, but I have a terrible memory. This is why I take notes over everything that I watch and read and stuff. But I was really disappointed in his character because he was one of my favorite parts of season 2, and it kept feeling like he was going to come back, and then he kept disappearing. And that's how it felt in the book too. It kept feeling like a character was going to have this super big emotional moment, and then it would be kind of rushed. And I think that's the case from the fact that this is the ending, and so on. Anyway, it's been 45 minutes of me ranting about Final Space, which is crazy. I shouldn't post this, but I guess if you're seeing this, thank you for watching. I'm sorry that you had to listen to me struggle. I don't know if I mean, like this channel, I just talk about media that means something to me. Or I'm trying to get better about that. Because I have a bunch of videos on my computer that are of me just like watching something and then talking about how I feel about it after. I talk to myself a lot. So I don't know if I'll talk about the expansions when they come out or if I'll just read them quietly by myself. But yeah, that's it for Final Space, which is kind of really sad to say. I will tack on this little extra note, reading Olan's story at the end of this book broke me in a way that I can't quite describe. I was choked up the entire time I read it, and I cried at the very end. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it for Final Space. I'm sure that I missed some kind of details. If you're curious about my thoughts on anything, feel free to ask me down in the comment section below. I will be happy to answer it. Mainly because I love talking about Final Space, and I have nobody in my personal life to talk about this book with. And so I'm posting this video on the internet for hopefully somebody to reach out and tell me that they also enjoyed the novel, or that they also had the same complaints as me, or that they enjoyed the stuff that I didn't enjoy. And I want to have a discussion about that, because I think that that's really interesting and fascinating. That's what I like to do. I'm really the kind of person who like looks at the things that I consume and like critically analyzes the things that other people say and like changes my mind, if it makes sense. So yeah, I know that there's an audio commentary for this book. I have not seen it. I made sure that I didn't want to listen to somebody talk about the themes of the book before I had read it, and I didn't want to listen to it after I had read it, but before I had gotten my thoughts out about the book, because I wanted to make sure that I got my full thoughts out and like what I thought the book was about and that kind of stuff. Because like, and if I can go on a side tangent about art just really quickly, because I guess I find it somewhat relevant here, because we are talking about something that got tax written off. Like Olan made this thing, put his whole heart in it, themes, that kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff into the book, and I appreciate him doing that, and I think that this book was made for him a lot, but also I own it now, and I attribute my own meaning to the things that are inside the book, and I'll never attribute those to Olan. You know what I mean? Like, I'll never say, oh, Olan added this element in because he was depressed or something. That would be crazy of me to do. Death of the author, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, it's very important for me to get my own cohesive thoughts about a thing that I'm reading or consuming or watching first, and then watch the person who made it talk about it, because then I can also take their thoughts and opinions and stuff and kind of coincide them with the book. Like, this is mine now, and I can talk about what it means to me. So like, Olan might not think it's about being alone, found family, that kind of stuff. I'm sure he does. I'm sure that found family is very much an element that he thinks that this story is about, especially because it's like textual. Like, this is so textual. But even if he didn't, it wouldn't matter, because that's what I got from the story. And consuming art, like when you're consuming it, what you get out of it is more important, right? Anyway, that's it for the Final Space graphic novel, the final chapter. It most certainly did feel like a final chapter. I was really happy with the ending, which I didn't talk about. I guess I should talk about that. I was really happy with the ending. I like where we left Gary. I like where we left I like where we left Gary. I like where we left Quinn. I like where Mooncake is at. Yeah. I like where all the characters are at the end of this. I think if I could change two things, it would be those. But I'm not the writer of this story. It's Olan's story. So all these are just critiques, but I couldn't have written it better. So yeah, I guess I should also address, like, Olan, if you're watching this, thanks for making this thing. It was good. I liked it very much. It means a lot to me that I got to read the final chapter, and despite me being critical about it, I hope you don't hate me. But also, Final Space means a lot to me. I'm not trying to get too sappy or anything, but I mean, like, Final Space means a lot to me. It's been around for ever. What, this thing came out in 2018, right? That's when the first season released. Final Space came out in 2018, when I was in high school, which is so long ago. And it provided me a comfort that I didn't know I needed, you know? And now reading it now, years later, having changed completely from who I was, but still resonating a lot with the themes and ideas that the book presents, is a unique experience. I have a hard time expressing into words, and I'm sure that you've heard this a lot. But thank you so much for finishing this. Thanks for pushing to get us an ending. It means a lot, and that's where I'll go. I'm not going to get too sappy. Thank you for listening to my long ramble about the Final Space graphic novel. Thank you, and goodbye. And then in the video, before I keep talking, oh no, he's going. End it. Crazy. Oh my gosh.